Nationals, who had another commitment for tonight, and from Cordelia Troy, who had Cessnock Council, but also a family illness that she's had to deal with today. And they both sent their apologies. My hope is that this will be an inclusive and respectful space, a place where it's safe to explore questions and ideas, and I'm going to do my best to try and keep us on track. I want to remind you that tonight is about hearing your candidates. So let's take that opportunity. I'm encouraging you to ask questions rather than making long comments, and I had a thought to myself in the last couple of days that in terms of that, at this stage before the ballot on Saturday, I don't think this is the time at which you're going to be able to convince the candidates to change their mind on something. So it's actually just about hearing their answers and making your judgment about that. I hope we're able to do that together. In terms of just very briefly framing our conversation, for me, politics, or what some people call work done in public, is at its best about pursuing the common good, or when it's framed by a bigger story, like a flourishing society. People flourish when they're safe, when they have decent employment or support in their unemployment, when they have access to adequate and appropriate education and health and housing, and an ability to participate in community decision making. It's about a vibrant civil society, robust politics with integrity, human rights, respect and care for the planet, and a healthy diversity. Very late in the piece, I sent each of the candidates a couple of questions that are really just my own framing of the conversation for this election, and they may or may not be able to pick up on some of that in their time or through your questions. But I had four main things. I guess the first one was about Australia, our First Peoples, and the place of recognition and the ongoing work of reconciliation in our society and the importance of that. The second one was, what plan would you advocate for moving from a coal-dependent future to a focus on renewables? I guess the question makes a couple of assumptions in its asking. Where do you see our people at their best and most creative in welcoming refugees to this country? And what is one change that we could make that would make a huge difference to the Hunter electorate? With that in mind, I'm going to invite the candidates to come, and I've got, if I can turn it on in time, a little 5-minute timer down the front just as a prompt for us. And I guess I decided that with no other particular wise method in mind, I'd just go with the order of the ballot paper for those that are here tonight. That way, that's as random as when it was chosen for the ballot paper itself. With that in mind, I want to invite our first speaker to come for the 5 minutes tonight, and that's John Harvey, who is standing as an independent candidate. You need to hear from John rather than me, but I know that he hails from Cessnock, that he's a dentist and a renowned owner of the local pub. Beyond that, I'll let him tell his own story. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the opportunity to come here tonight and meet with you and talk about who I am and what I stand for. I'd like to start by saying that I was inspired to get involved in politics many years ago at the age of 18 when I was listening to Teddy Kennedy speak at his brother's funeral, and he made this comment. My brother said, "Some men see things as they are and say why. My brother dreams things that never were and says why not." If it was playing for the future, we need to dream things that never were. Because if we are constantly just going over what we did yesterday, today, then nothing will come of it. So to build the same hospital today as we were going to build yesterday, or the same school today as we did yesterday, just to fill an election promise, then that's what's wrong with this political process. And the other problem with the political process is that we add a political party on top of that. And when people vote for me on Saturday, they'll be voting for an individual who is not tied to a political party and will be able to put the people of the Hunter first. Now, I come from Canberra originally. I went to university and became a dentist, and then took an interest in politics. I've spent probably 15 or 20 years in the political process from 1980. I ran as a candidate in the next to Canberra. Over that following 5 or 6 years, I ran the National Party in Canberra. I also worked with Andrew Peacock as his personal secretary and political advisor, and then went on to work with Jeff Kennett in Melbourne and Nick Greiner in Sydney when he was Premier. So I really do have an understanding of how the political process works. One thing that I find though today is that politicians don't seem to understand how small business works and how the community works. It's interesting that the Labor Party have decided that a small business is $2 million turnover a year, and the Liberal Party think are up to $4 million now. But they don't realise all the other problems that small business has. If we are going to develop the Hunter, we need to be able to get behind small business. They don't realise that a turnover of $2 million, and in fact, Rob mentioned the hotel that we own. We bought 5 years ago and had a staff of 1. We now have 35 staff, and we do have a turnover of more than $2 million. In fact, we are a medium-sized business under Labor and a small business under Liberal. So we're not allowed to get any of these incentives now because we are a big business. But because we have a salary of over $1 million a year, that's $1 million, we pay taxes of about $250,000, $300,000 a year, so that's $230,000 extra on the top of it. You get to the point where after you add the food for the hotel and all the bank costs and the council costs, there's nothing left. But still, we're seen to be very rich people because we've got a huge turnover. So one of the big things I see to get this area working again is jobs. And my wife and I have had the experience to create jobs. And we've also had the experience to see how we can get young people involved in our job, in our business. So we employ a lot of apprentices in our business. We employ young people who can't get a job coming from school, and we help out there. We also have seen at first hand the problems with the education system and also with the health system. And it's interesting that there is a way to fix the health system, and it's quite interesting that if we take it seriously and we allow 4 or 5 things to happen, we can reduce the cost of providing health but improve the system very quickly. But unfortunately, governments won't take those positions. Number one, if the health was looked after by the federal government and the federal government only, we would save billions of dollars. If we organised a health system that in fact looked after health first and fitness and getting wealth and wealthy within the body and fit and understood how the body works, we could save billions too. But unfortunately, our governments don't think about how to fix the problem. All they do, and if you look at all the promises, it's all about money. We'll put 25 billion in here, they don't tell you how they're going to spend it. They'll put 25 billion in here, but they don't do how much is going to be wasted. And I can see from the clock, I have 1 second left, so I'll leave the rest to questions.
Next up is Joel Fitzgibbon, who's standing for Labor. Joel is known as having been the member for Hunter for 20 years, a former auto electrician, someone who's worked in local council as well, and who comes to us having experience as shadow, as minister, and as government whip. So we'll now hear from you. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Rob. It's okay to call you Rob? Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. I start on a bipartisan note. If a matter on which all the candidates agree, concerned about the election being called in winter, or indeed during school holidays, we all agree we blame the Apple term. It's not our fault. Rob, I'm going to do things in reverse. You've already introduced me. I'm going to answer your 4 questions as quickly as I can, and then if I have time, maybe talk about me and what drives me in politics. So I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respect to their elders past and present. I come from a party I hope you know, which is totally devoted to real reconciliation, and we will remain so.
Use the mic.
Refugees, Rob, in this time available, maybe we'll go back to questions, but obviously, I'm sure like everyone in this room, a great concern to me and the party I represent. For me, the thing I feel most passionately about is addressing the issue at its source. If we could only do more by way of foreign aid, collectively as developed nations, hopefully we could meet with some success in ensuring that we don't have people escaping persecution and war in the first place. Renewables, well, as you know, the Labor Party has made a very strong commitment to renewables, a 50% target by 2030. We are committed also, of course, to an emissions trading scheme, a carbon constraint, so we can transition carefully and with some certainty to a lower carbon economy. What would I do for the hunter? Well, it's hard to nominate one thing. I can nominate highways, and hospitals, and all sorts of infrastructure, but for me, the thing I would most like to do is fund Gonski. Because what drives me in politics more than anything is youth unemployment, intergenerational unemployment, those kids who are born to be idle, those kids who you know from birth have little chance to succeed in life and to reach their full potential. All of those young people have one thing in common, 99% of them at least, they all end up going to kindergarten. And that's the point at which we can intervene on each and every one of them. And through Gonski we can do that. By properly resourcing the schools and our teachers, we can make sure that the right people are on the spot to assess these children and to build the special programs they need to reach their full potential. Not just them. Not just them, but those who come with special talents, to ensure they're not held back by others that might need more attention so they can reach their full potential in life. So more than anything, as hard as a choice as it is, I would fully fund Gonski. That's my aspiration, and that's what my party is committed to. Now, Rob generously said I've been in the Parliament for 20 years. I know I don't look that old. I'll take the disagreement. I got into politics not because my father was involved. Some might know that he was in the Parliament prior to my arrival there. But of course, growing up, I got to form views and opinions about politics that children my age wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to form. But what really drove me to politics was the neglect of my local town, Stretton. In those days, the streets, the CBD, the parks were in a despicable way. Stretton was known best for its potholes. So I joined council to improve my town. But of course that led me on further paths. And it wasn't long before I realised that the real way to make a difference, of course, was to go to higher levels of government. And I was fortunate and privileged enough to be introduced and to serve in the federal parliament at the highest levels. I remain passionate. 20 years on, I'm as energetic about my job as I've ever been. I must say, while I'm sad to lose the old areas of my electorate that have been carved out by the redistribution, I'm also energised to be getting to know new areas, meeting new people, and I must say, it's not bad to represent some water. I've had dams in the past, plenty of them, but I've never represented such beautiful areas like those on the western side of Lake Macquarie. So it's wonderful to come along here tonight. I thank you, Rob, for organising it. Some assistance to me, and I hope it's some assistance to all of you, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Arjay Martin is running as an independent. The information says 32 years old, grew up in the Upper Hunter, around Muswellbrook and Sandy Hollow, works for Roy Morgan Research and has a family with some young kids and some background in engaging in local council issues and campaigns, and comes to us tonight for his kick-off with 5 minutes. Thanks, Arjay.
Thank you, everyone. Now, I might not be the best person, doing speeches, etc., but I prefer substance over style. You won't hear many jokes from me, etc., but I'm really here to hear from you and what you think and your ideas. I seek to represent you as individuals, not, the Labor Party is seen to represent only union-type people, and Liberal Party, big business. I'd rather represent everyone. Everyone has great ideas, terrible ideas, etc. I'm sorry about my appearance at the moment. I might not be dressed as a business person at the moment, yet I've done more for businesses in Lake Macquarie than anyone else on this stage. Myself and Jim Sullivan fought against the 2012 massive rate rises that Lake Macquarie City Council unanimously voted on, which was 90% rate rise for business rates over 7 years and 70% for residents over 7 years. Because of the pressure from myself and Jim Sullivan and Back to Basics, I wasn't in Back to Basics, that basically brought up support enough to make IPART pass a smaller rate rise, which has saved every one of you, if you live in the area or work in the area, money. In terms of what we can do to improve the area and at a federal level, we have a problem with free trade agreements. Free trade sounds like a great philosophy, everyone should be equal in the world, yet it's not an equal playing field. If you can get a pair of shoes made in China for $2 and you don't have to worry about paying superannuation, health costs, environmental costs, you don't care about the staff, they don't care that they die of cancer in 20 years' time or something from breathing toxic chemicals, then how can someone who wants to buy Australian products to keep Australians employed and sell Australian products to Australians compete with that if they have to pay $30 for a pair of shoes to be made compared to a rival paying $2? We also tend to find that a lot of parties and candidates talk about diversity. It doesn't seem a very diverse stage, which isn't anyone here's fault. Yet we do tend to find that political parties don't tend to pick as a candidate in a seat that's winnable anyone over or under the age of, say, 45 years old. That's what I find, and I'm sure you notice that yourself. Other things I've done in the area, at Cameron Park along Minmai Road and North Lakes Drive, there was a dangerous intersection where more than one car accident was occurring per day. That was Labor's #1 promise for the 2012 mayoral election, and nothing was done about that until I went in a few by-elections and was, I should say, pummeling the mayor, who's now the state member, into fulfilling her promise. And that roundabout is finally open. My first preference was traffic lights, yet and it's a weird design. I don't know if any of you have been up that way lately. Some other things were Lake Macquarie City Council implemented seed rise level caveats on people's property. So, you buy a house that's anywhere near the lake, then people were being banned from doing things on their property that they should be able to do what they like on their property, so long as it doesn't negatively interfere with other people. Based on the so-called science, the council predicted that by the year 2100 that the level of Lake Macquarie would be 2.7 metres higher than it currently is during the king tide, which is just ridiculous, for one, and for two, how many houses are designed to last 8 years anyway. And I'm looking forward to your questions. You can talk to me after the event, find out what I stand for, tell me what you want your representative to represent you in Parliament and to stand for you. Thank you very much.
Peter Morris is standing for the Australian Greens. Surely looks too young to be a retired TAFE teacher. Living in the Lower Hunter, and you would understand a keen interest in social justice and environmental issues, and we'll invite Peter to come and speak to us now.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thanks everyone for coming out on such a cold night. I'll lead by referring to an article in the Lakes Mail which says, Mr Morris is a former TAFE teacher and ardent climate change campaigner. Well, I'll put my hand up for both of those things with some pride. However, I do have a much, much longer and deeper involvement in Lake Macquarie, in particular Western Lake Macquarie, than that. I was involved in the campaign which saw a lot of bushland conserved around the lake, and in this area the particular thing is Morisset Hospital. That site was in danger of being redeveloped. It's now conserved as bushland, and I was one of a small group of people that achieved that. Also, I was very much involved in the campaign which saw the rejection of an open cut mine proposed for between Awabba and Kurumbong. That was something that was fought very hotly by communities, and it's something that I made a substantial contribution to. And slightly further afield and more recently, proposed open cut and auger mine at Blackall's Park. I contributed a lot to that campaign. In fact, I was the one that spent many hours poring over information from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and was able to work out that there were 70,000 people living within 10 kilometres of that open cut mine, and this is the people potentially affected by dust and the consequent health problems. Now, the bigger picture issues facing us all now is climate change. Now, I'm proud that the Greens have the best policy on climate change, and one that we know is achievable. It's been costed out, it is achievable, and that is a plan for 90% renewables by 2030. And that's closely allied with a change in the mining industry, and indeed a change in the economy in the Hunter Valley and in this area. As far ago as 2008, there was a study done by Newcastle University that found if we got out of coal mining and burning coal for power generation in the Hunter and Central Coast, that would create an increase of 4,000 jobs. That's just to be self-sufficient with energy. If we became a significant exporter of energy, that increase in jobs could be 10,000. Now, that was that long ago. I was very pleased to participate more recently in the launch of a Greens policy, which is the Greens Job-Rich Plan for the Hunter. It does have 7 points in it, and this is broad points. It's I'm just working from a leaflet here, and there is another level of detail under this, but it's a plan for phasing out old coal-fired power stations. It's working towards the end in the export of coal. And remember, if we are going to limit temperature increase globally to less than 2 degrees, that means most of the coal that we know about now has to stay in the ground. And we can't keep exporting at that rate. We need to create the Hunter as a hub for renewable energy industry. We need to support TAFE to train people moving out of coal mining into other employment. We need to support income payments for people living out of coal mine, and we need to support new industries in energy equipment manufacturing and delivery, and we need to legislate so that all levels of government will buy locally first. Now, for health in this area, there's been massive budget cuts for health. These are figures projected across 10 years, but for the hospitals that you rely on, for Warham and John Hunter, Warham has had $281 million stripped out of its budget, and John Hunter $667 million. Now, locally, I'm well aware of the well-researched and presented proposal for a South Lake integrated healthcare facility. I'm well aware of the regional planning and the population growth that's behind that, and that has facilitated the need for such a well put together proposal. Other things on health is that we would keep Medicare, and the Greens would not support ever. We would continue to oppose any form of co-payment. On education, return TAFE to what it was. Keep with the full Gonski funding over 6 years, including $4.5 billion over the last 2 years. As Gandhi said, first of all they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Well, that's what's happening with the Greens. We've been ignored, we've been laughed at, and now the old parties are fighting, so we're looking forward to a future. Thank you very much.
Richard Stretton is the candidate for the Christian Democratic Party. What I read said born in Darwin and travelled around Australia's west a bit with family in their missionary work, an apprentice, a rural person, running your own business with on-site farm machinery repair.
Mechanical labor.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Come and talk to us.
Thank you, people. It's been great to have you pull this together. I represent the Christian Democratic Party, and you would be surprised how hard it is for me to get into a church, especially wearing this shirt. It's not allowed in, which is pretty sad really, but I really encourage you and thank you for doing what you're doing, because the church does have to get active. The fact is, 64% of Australians ticked the Christian box at the last census. Right? If Christians voted Christian, we would have executive government overnight. But the church doesn't want to get active. I feel you might have to shortly as you look around at the changes in politics lately. Let me go back to the beginning. I was born in Darwin, so no, I'm not a local, but I'll get to how long I have been here shortly. Born in Darwin, actually a place called Borroloola. Anyone heard of Borroloola? Yeah, that's surprising. I grew up on an Aboriginal community out there. My parents were missionaries with the Aboriginal Inland Mission. So the first 4 years of my life, the only white faces I saw were my own family. And then when my sister turned 5, we moved to Darwin for her to go to school. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself because it'll help you understand why I answer the questions. I'm going to leave the issues basically for the questions that come from the floor. It'll give you a bit of understanding because Aboriginal issues will come up. I know the average Aboriginal issue better than most, certainly not as much as some. I'm not Aboriginal myself, but I have worked alongside and with Aboriginals and had a lot to do with Aboriginals over the years. And that comes from that first few years of my life. From there, just before Cyclone Tracy, we moved to Western Australia, where my father died when I was 7. So my mother raised me and my sister by herself from there on. And that got a little bit tough down in WA, didn't have any family with her, so she moved back to Darwin. I finished high school in Darwin, and then got an apprenticeship on a cattle station out from Katherine in the Northern Territory. So I'm a blue-collar candidate. I'm a plant mechanic by trade. Since getting my trade, I've also got auto mechanics, boiler making and electrics and hydraulics, all related to mechanical trades. So I have operated my own business and I understand the issues of employment. As a businessman who employs people, I don't employ anyone unless I really have to. It's not the way it should be. It's a fundamental problem in this nation that you really don't employ people unless you have to, because of all of the legal implications and the red tape that goes with it. It's just not worth it unless you really have to. So I understand that, having operated my business since 1991. Back to when I finished back in the Territory, I met a girl up there called Angela, and she's sitting up the back. I thought she was pretty good, and I married her. And then we moved to Victoria. So I have moved around a fair bit. While I was in Victoria, we had both our kids down there. So I've got a son, Joshua, and daughter, Sarah. Daughter's done zoology in university and is now living and married in Albury. And my son is doing civil engineering at Newcastle University. While I was in Victoria, I did 4 years in the Australian Infantry as a infantry section commander. So during that time, I showed a willingness at least to live, die and serve for this country. And that certainly matured me a lot, and I'm thankful for those years. And one of the things that moulded me into who I am today. While we're down there, I did 8 years in Victoria and I thought, yeah, I'll get used to the cold, No, 8 years later I said, no, stuff this, I'm moving north. And we got this far, and this is where we've been for the last 20 years. So I've been in Singleton since 1966. By far the longest I've ever stayed in one place. So no, I'm not local, but I do know this area fairly well. I might be at the northern end of the Hunter, which was the centre of my electorate, but the electorate boundaries have moved, as I'm sure you're well aware. And now I've picked up this area. So I know a little bit down here, but I will acknowledge that I don't know it as well as the upper Hunter. I know mining from the inside out, because I've worked within mines as a contractor, and also obviously living in Hunter, no mining issues from the outside. Yeah, why do I stand for CDP? I see over the 50 years of my life a worrying decline in moral values. And that's why I stand for CDP. We're the only party that has the guts to put the cross in our logo, and that's important to me. I fly under that flag, I'm proud to do so. And we're also the only party that has a statement of faith attached to membership, which is why we're one Christian party that has survived 35 years in state politics for that reason. If you don't have a statement of faith attached to membership, you get overrun internally by members that do not aspire to your faith, which has happened to other parties. So that's why I stand for CDP. We stand for family values, and we stand for moral standing, and obviously we do have a good platform on economic issues, and I'm sure they'll come up in question times as well. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
And John Wareham is standing as an independent candidate. John, who runs his own business, doing handiwork, repairs, all sorts of jobs by the sounds of it. Hire him to do, with a background as a retired Uniting Church minister, chaplaincy at John Hunter Hospital, and a number of projects that you will have heard about in media that John, I'm sure, will be able to share with us, either through the 5 minutes or through some of your questions. Thanks, John.
Perhaps Rob and I know each other quite well. Perhaps what Rob doesn't know is that I actually ran an importing business back in the 1980s, and also managed a major retail store in Sydney in the early 90s as well. So it's worth actually perhaps just passing on. Some of you know me as a Uniting Church minister who has worked hard at community building throughout the Hunter. Some of you may know me as a chaplain who has visited either you or a relative at the John Hunter Hospital in the 5 years I was chaplain there. You may know me as a small businessman. You may know me as a teacher of your child. You may know me as the coach of the local, well, it's not local here in Morisset, but the Lake Macquarie under-16 soccer, or perhaps you may know me as the secretary of the Toronto Brass Band. And you might have even heard me out in the streets playing at Christmas time, playing carols. I wear a lot of different hats in the course of any one week, and Uniting Church Minister is one of those hats, and a very important one as well. But I'm here because I believe that the past shouldn't determine the future. But I do believe it is actually time for change in our electorate. Because I believe that with the right leadership, our country can do better. I believe that with the right leadership, our region can do better. I believe with the right leadership that this electorate can do better. I believe it's time for some new contributions, and I believe that I can make some of those contributions. So I want to offer you, first of all, a couple of clear solutions in health and then in education, which both major parties have failed to really deal with effectively. The first one, I announce tonight an initiative in health that adds a third pillar to our health system. We have currently a private health system, a public health system, both of which obviously provide wonderful support for people. And I offer tonight another third pillar, the Australian Health Investment Scheme. This will allow individuals to invest in their own health, it will incentivise healthy living, it will give payouts throughout their lifetime, and it will empower them through concessional tax treatment on contributions to manage and fund their own health as a third option in Australian health. I've taken superannuation style thinking, cut out some of the interference that governments seem to play around with over the years when they come across a scheme like that, and built in bonuses throughout the system. When you reach the age of 38, you will receive a benefit of over $30,000 in cash. At age 60, you will receive a benefit of over $60,000 in cash. At age 70, a $100,000 bonus in cash. And you will have a regular 10% of your scheme balance year on year after the age of 75 until the scheme expires, or you do, in which case the funds will revert to your estate. You can see my Facebook page for the details of that, and those calculations are based on a simple $2,500 contribution per year. But you have to be a young person to get the full effect of it. Much like when superannuation was introduced, it helped fund retirement living. This scheme will help fund health expenses into the future and will relieve the public purse and empower individuals, as well as incentivise people towards healthy living. Turning to education, I announce also tonight financial literacy training in schools. I'm tired of seeing young people come out of school and graduates come out of university with no financial training, no capacity to commercialise their ideas, protect their intellectual property, or understand compliance and workers' compensation, all the variety of things that go along with starting business. Further to this, in the area of education, I announce tonight a debt discount scheme for students who, in the first instance, start a business of their own that's profitable. In the second instance, begin employing somebody. In the third instance, start exporting. So on all three of those fronts, I would propose that at each point, those business owners, those young people who manage to commercialise their bright ideas, are given a 10, perhaps 20% for employing somebody and a further 10% if you begin to export. The actual numbers I've got here, if you want to follow them up with me later. In business, I'd also like to see the GST threshold lifted to $150,000 to empower small business. In a variety of other areas, I see savings that could be introduced through business and revolutionise the compliance costs for business and for startups in this country through e-receiving of business transactions. I'm very close to time up, so I want to do with Rob's 4 things. Firstly, Aboriginal recognition in the Constitution, very important to me. Consultation along the lines of the National Health and Medical Research Council's guidelines, which already exist and just aren't implemented in government relations with Aboriginal people. Absolutely support initiatives to control climate change. Refugees, best and most creative I see when people are actually meeting one another at home and welcoming people. And best thing for our electorate, improvements in education and improvements in health. Okay, as a teacher I could go into more of the detail on education later, but my time is up.
So folks, what I want to offer at this stage is that there's a microphone at each side here at the front. It's not essential to queue, but that will help if a number of people come at once. It'll give you a visual sense of whose turn it is. Again, I invite us to come and ask our questions. With 6 candidates present, there's no other way than to say you might ask a general question and it's about who is up for answering. You may start with a particular person and we'll go from there. And we have until 25 past 7. So it's over to you, and I will attempt to moderate and help us make it work.
Thank you for having us here. Firstly, I'd like to thank each of you for being prepared to give up your own private lives to represent your country. That's wonderful. Thank you. My question is to Joel Fitzgibbon. Do you acknowledge that a code of silence around boat people issues increases the perception that Australia is losing its moral compass in relation to refugees and treating refugees on Manus Island and Nauru with inhumanity and blatant cruelty? Do you acknowledge that our current code of silence is damaging to all parties? Will you and your party respect the Australian people and refugees' rights to freedom of information at the most basic level by having a policy of being fully open on all matters relating to refugees, including boat arrivals, numbers, methods by which they are handled, and the rights of all staff in detention centres and refugees to speak openly and unconditionally to media and to report on conditions for the people held under the name of our nation in those places.
Thanks for your question. Yes, yes, and yes. Would you like me to expand, Bob? I just don't accept there is ever any excuse for anything but total transparency on these matters. And I'm sure we were all sickened together when for the first 12 months, or maybe 18 months or even more, the current government claimed that they couldn't speak about any event which happened on the water, and we were all, I'm sure, collectively concerned about the secrecy around what's happening on Manus in particular. So my answer is yes. I could talk for an hour probably about these refugee issues, but I suspect, well, I don't have that opportunity. But so I think I'll just leave it at that. But if we receive more questions about refugees, I'll be very happy to expand further.
Could you go back to the Labor Party and ask them to be a more loud, vocal and strong voice on this issue? We all understand that the complexities of the boat issues, what the Australian people are increasingly not understanding is why no one is speaking for those people.
Yeah. Well, I will have a bit of a shot at answering that as quickly as I possibly can while giving it justice. These are complex issues, and none of us want to see refugees treated inhumanely. We are divided, of course, torn, of course, between these competing concerns. One for the protection of those fleeing persecution and war and other things, and the need to stop people being sucked in by people smugglers and putting their children on a leaky boat that may or may not make it to the other end. That's the complexity of this issue. So we need to ensure that we break, if you like, for fear of going into the vernacular, the business model of the people smugglers, while also maintaining our approach and commitment to humanity. Of course, we increased in government our refugee intake. Remember, every person that comes by a boat displaces someone else in a refugee camp around the world is also wanting to come to Australia. So we must keep the process orderly, but at the same time, we must be pragmatic and realistic in our approach, and at all times keep our basic instincts as human beings in the right place. But if there were easy answers, we would have delivered them a long time ago. Again, as I said in my opening address, nothing makes me more angry than the right-wing candidates who convince people that we shouldn't be spending so much on foreign aid. We spend a minuscule on foreign aid. We are one of the richest countries in the world. And if the rich countries got together and spent, let's say, 1% of GDP on foreign aid, we could afford it. Of course we can afford it. We wouldn't have so many people fleeing persecution and starvation. So I say our focus should be on the source of these problems.
I will just check if anybody's thirsty to have a response. I know that was a question directly to Joel, and sometimes that will happen.
I believe that this whole issue is the biggest problem we have in the world today. And I do feel for those refugees who are trying to get to Australia. If you care to go to my Facebook page, somebody sent me a very simple explanation of the problem we have today with refugees and people in third world countries who are starving and all those sorts of things. The problem is huge, and we need to get back to the basics and spend a lot more time thinking about how to fix it than trying to give it a few dollars here and a few dollars there. But seriously, if you just have a look at this thing on my Facebook page, it shows that there's these gumballs. They use those gummy things you eat, and they show that each one is 1 million people. And you see all these gumballs, there's about 6 billion people in the world who are starving. and the Americans take 1 million each year and and we're doing something. We're taking 1 million. And it really made me think about this issue, and I tell you, if you don't spend 20% of your time, and I don't spend 20% of my time between now and the day I die trying to assist this problem, then I'm wasting my time. Thanks.
Over this
All right,
side,
for this gentleman.
you've got yourself sorted out. Good. Go for it, please.
Mr Fitzgibbon, another question for you. Your colleague, Pat Conroy, when he was the local member here, conducted a survey on communications in this area. He took specific interest in radio, TV, reception, and above all the internet. There was found to be a black band between Martinsville and through to Rathmines, right across the southern end of Lake Macquarie, a black spot in communications and particularly the internet and anything relying on mobile reception was substandard. I know that his frustration was that he made several representations to the then Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, Minister for Communications, and received no adequate response. In fact, no replies on a number of occasions. Can I ask you, consider either scenario. If your party wins government on Saturday, or if your party fails to win government on Saturday, what could you do as the local member to make some kind of impact to improve the quality of internet, particularly to make better available the NBN, and what is the policy that your party would follow in trying to make this area, or citizens from all over Australia, I guess, much more connected than we are?
Thanks for the question. Can I just acknowledge, Rob, that I know that all of the candidates would have liked to have made a contribution on the refugee question, and I appreciate the fact that they restrained themselves because we wouldn't have been here or not if they had. But I just wanted to acknowledge that. I didn't want anyone to think that they might not have been keen to provide their own response. You're right. Telecommunications in what I call the new part of my electorate is an enormous problem. It's a problem in the older parts of my electorate, always has been. We've made some gains, but it seems to be a bigger issue down here and around the lake than it is in the former parts of my electorate. Let me answer it in two ways. Mobile phones in the 21st century, the fact that we have black spots in highly populated urban areas like Morisset is just ridiculous. And I still can't believe that when you drive up the M1, which I do all too frequently, you still have so many black spots. We are committed to the Mobile Black Spots program. So too, I have to say, is the coalition. And I hope we can work together, not fight about this issue and sort it out. Broadband internet access is an entirely different question. I won't give you my long speech about our superior NBN, our plan to deliver fibre right to the premises, the house, and indeed the local business. Sadly, Malcolm Turnbull was unrelevant. And it's one of the great tragedies of the past 3 years, because we are building a network for the 21st century. The internet's no longer a toy. It's no longer something you just send emails on occasionally. It runs our lives. How many of you here have had to fill out a government form on the internet? You know, there is often no other way these days. People have to have access. School kids can't present, and university students can't present their projects or assignments in any other way these days, but on the internet, on a computer. So it's not a want, it's a need. And we remain absolutely dedicated and determined to see through our original proposal for a first-class, world's best-class national broadband network. And just yesterday, Joe Sinclair, our Shadow Minister for Communications, announced that 50,000 additional homes in our first tranche, if we're elected on Saturday, will be delivered the fibre to the home. I'm going to pick up on what you said about if I'm not in government after Saturday. My answers to that, and I rarely give myself self-praise. Ministers in Canberra are very, very scared of Joel Fitzgibbon. I can assure you. And from opposition, I can do good things. And on this issue and on all issues that are of concern to my communities, I will do good things and I will deliver. I've done it in the past. Sadly, in my 20 years in the Parliament, I've spent only 6 years in government. So I've been pretty used to opposition and become pretty familiar with the methods of getting good things out of ministers despite being in opposition.
So just adding to what you previously heard, there's also another issue with black spots in the electorate, not only where you can't get any reception, but where Telstra rules and there's no choice for people, say outside, if you go a little bit west, past Cessnock, say places like Paxton, Millfield, Barami, which I'm sure most of you probably haven't even heard of, that the only options available, if any, are Telstra. And also with Pat Conroy, he claimed for the 2013 federal election on ABC radio, which I have a quote which I can get out in my car if really necessary, but he claimed that he was going to provide free NBN internet to every household and business in Western Lake Macquarie and Western Newcastle, which was a Charlton electorate, and it's all good and well to make these promises, even though that was clearly ridiculous in the first place, but no one gets held accountable for such promises. Even in 2011, the then Labor state government claimed that they purchased a dredge for Lake Macquarie, which it was never purchased. So I hope people, bear in mind that take everything they hear from a politician or a candidate with a grain of salt. Fantastic.
It'll be a quick one. I don't think you're going to get any candidate up here who's going to say, oh, let's take out the mobile network and close it down. Everybody's going to support this. It's essential for business that we have good internet. It's essential for business that we have mobile network. So I'm sure we all support expanding the mobile network, and whoever gets in, that's going to happen because you've got the population growth here to do it. What seems to be a little bit of an imbalance here is the northern end of the lake has probably got some of the best internet access in the state. They've got a large rollout of NBN, and yet down here you've got nothing. So there's that distinction between the north and the south, which seems a bit of an imbalance. But either way, I think irrelevant which party gets in, everyone with any common sense, which I suppose is a little lacking in Parliament sometimes, but anyone with any degree of common sense can see the need for expanding telephone and internet access.
I'd like to see fibre to the premises put simply, rather than fibre to the node. I was so confident that that would occur that I actually put allocation in when I built my house, so that I've got a nice little pipeline waiting to take the fibre up to the house. So I can't wait to get fibre to the premises. Fibre to the node is better than nothing, but let's get fibre to the premises, and I challenge everybody here to actually work for that. Going back to the refugee thing, I just want to go back briefly. I have actually been in Syria, which is probably not something that very many people in this hall have done. And I can say that a lot of the issues we face today with refugees is not actually about a lack of expenditure of money in particular areas, as Joel actually made the comment about. It's actually because of war, because of crisis. In Africa, it can be anything from diamonds to oil to any other number of things that the conflicts are over, but they are the push factors. And actually spending just bucket loads of money in the wrong way will not help at all. What's actually required is strong leadership on the international scene from the United Nations and strong advocacy from countries like Australia to ensure that those conflicts are managed better. And I can't think of a conflict that I've seen in recent history that has been managed more poorly on the international scheme than the Syrian one.
Thanks for coming in tonight, gents. I have a question for Arjay. First of all, thanks for coming in. Obviously, you are the sort of odd person up there on the stage, which is not a derogatory comment. I do believe that there is a need for fresh blood into Australian politics. I have looked at your website, I've looked at all of your gentlemen's profiles and whatnot, and I think that you have got some good initiative behind you, especially to do with this local area. You have really done more for this place, and especially within 25 k's of here, than 4 of the other 5 candidates on the stage. Obviously, given some of the information that you have on your website available, for the public, there is a couple of sort of contentious things that you have to say. So I just wanted to clarify one thing in particular, and that was 2 of the candidates that were to be here tonight.
Yeah.
One is not here, Cordelia Troy, but you state that they're not constitutionally able to run as candidates. Can you just clarify that for me and for the rest of the room?
So, thank you for your question. So, under Section 44 of the Australian Constitution, it has certain prohibitions that people can't run for Parliament if they don't fulfil certain things, or if they do fall under certain categories, such things as foreign allegiance, or in the case of Cordelia Troy and Ruth Rogers, it's holding an office of the profit under the Crown. They did not resign from their respective councils. One's a Cessnock City Councillor, one's a Singleton City Councillor, before the hour of nomination. Therefore, they are constitutionally ineligible. When you nominate, you also have to tick a little box stating that you are not prohibited. A fellow councillor of Cordelia Troy on Cessnock City Council, Sue Ellen Wrightson, who is the #1 Palm United Senate candidate, did resign beforehand. She even had a thing in the newspaper stating, "No, I really love my time on the council, but I must resign because of Section 44 of the Constitution." Councillors are paid not only so-called allowances, they are also paid fees, which you can find in the Local Government Act 1993. That's a taxable income source, so therefore there's no doubt that there is any, there's no doubt that they're prohibited. The last time it was going to be brought to the High Court was when Oakshott and Windsor ended up supporting the Gillard government, and there were 4 Liberal councillors who became, or Liberal, I should say coalition, so Liberal Nationals, who became federal parliamentarians, and one of those was George Christensen. I forget who the other 3 were, and there was talk of the Labor Party, if they couldn't form government, taking that to the High Court, and therefore there would have been by-elections in those 4 areas. There's also an additional problem with Ms Troy, in that she is an independent candidate. So if she receives more than 4% of the first preference primary votes, that is, #1s, then technically, even though it's not likely to happen, but she could be charged with fraud or receiving financial advantage by deception, which they're issues that no one can deal with at the moment. Once they have the close of nominations, they can't withdraw candidates, just like with Kevin Baker last federal election, who was in the Liberal Party. He had apparently some joke website, which some other people supposedly put some sexist jokes on there, or racist jokes. So the Liberal Party kicked him out of the party, yet he was already on the ballot paper. With his name Liberal, they do not shred the ballot papers and put independent, and also he officially withdrew, or unofficially, he stated publicly that he withdrew from the race, yet because the ballot paper's already done, you can't actually withdraw.
If you don't mind, Ron, I'd like to respond to that on behalf of the candidates who can't be here. My opponents, of course, but I want to defend their right to contest this election. Section 44, of course, is very old, and like most things, something we inherited in principle from the Commons in the United Kingdom. But the original concept was to ensure, it was like a separation of powers between bureaucrats, public servants and politicians. And you can see what the founding fathers were seeking to do the idea of a senior public servant also exercising the right to be a parliamentarian was something that wasn't considered a bright idea in those days. Since then, of course, Section 44 remains in place, and it's become very confusing for all and sundry, because various challenges to the Court of Dispute Returns over the years, the last one, if I'm correct, is 1996, has broadened the scope of Section 44. In 96, for example, Jackie Kelly, the then member for Lindsay, was found not to qualify because she hadn't designed a position with the Air Force. Now, this has been an ongoing issue since then. There have been a number of parliamentary inquiries, and an inquiry by the Electoral Commission that I recall. In each and every report, everyone agrees that Section 44 is outdated and in need of repair, but the only way to repair it is to go to a constitutional referendum, and as you all know, that requires not only a majority of people, but a majority of states. It's a very expensive exercise, so it's basically been put into two-part basket. But the idea that someone who's committed themselves to their local community by getting themselves elected to council should not be allowed to contest a federal election is a silly one. Everyone agrees, and there's no objection from me, and I'm sure there's no objection from a majority of the candidates.
Give you an opportunity.
Yeah, very briefly. I actually resigned my position with the Education Department before I stood as a candidate for this election because of that section. But it should be noted that that section, if it was enforced, actually would eliminate any teacher, any police officer, any ambulance person, any person who has a position that is actually paid for by the government from taking on a role of candidate. And I think that's completely unacceptable. So it needs to be fixed. Even if it's difficult, it needs to be fixed. But I think there's a whole other issue with this, and that's electoral reform. And I would like to see the AEC stop funding candidates for their electoral efforts. Last election, 2013, the Labor Party banked $20 million. The Liberal Party banked $23 million, just so that both of those parties could bombard us with ads this election and pay for each other, pay for their own self-promotion. I'd like to see that stopped. And you can check those figures on the AEC website, and I can give you the link for it. I've got the link sitting on a pamphlet in my car. I think further, all candidates should have to live in their electorate for a minimum of one electoral cycle before they stand. Okay, and I forgot the next one. Anyway, so you can see, I want to see a transition in the way the electoral system is run. Thank you.
Arjay would like to make a response, but in the interests of our time and a couple of other people wanting to ask questions, you want to give him a moment yeah, so I want to go to this fellow over here and then over to that side, and then I've got a third person in mind, and a fourth and fifth if we get there. Okay, we're 7:10.
I had a question for the National Party candidate, who it's a shame she can't be here tonight. We're really the outer suburbs of Newcastle, being the western end of Lake Macquarie, and we've been now tacked onto what is really a rural and regional seat. At the last state election, I believe around about 25% of people in this area voted Liberal. Now, for 50 years of my adolescent and adult life, I've listened to the Liberal Party bang on to me about freedom is the most important thing in our democracy. Freedom to choose what school my kids go to, freedom to choose private or public health, freedom to join a union or not. Why is it the Liberal Party has denied me in this election, in this electorate, the freedom to vote for them? There are fundamental differences between a National and a Liberal. And if I wanted to vote Liberal, they're denying me that right. Could any of the candidates up there tell me why have we got this, what I see as a bit of hypocrisy on the part of the Liberal Party? They can't have it both ways. They can't tell me about all the freedoms and then take the most fundamental freedom away from me, the right to vote for the Jolly Beans.
Like many of the candidates, I've been on the hustings and handing out how to vote cards, and there is quite a lot of anger in the community about this decision. But I think the problem stems with the lack of political engagement that Australians generally have with the political process. So, and Joel, please forgive me for having a bit of a crack here. I asked one of the local Labor presidents of their branch how many people they had. They had about 8 people 6 or 8 years ago. Now they have about 12 people in their branch. You know, there's probably more people in this hall tonight than there are actually Labor branch members within a 30 or 40 kilometre radius or 50 kilometre radius from here. And the same could be said of the Liberals. The problem is that they struggle for good candidates. The best and brightest in our country do not enter politics. The best and brightest do all sorts of other things other than enter politics. And part of the problem is because our politicians are so disappointing. Who wants to go into Parliament? Who wants to become a politician when you're so constantly disappointed by lies and more untruths? Or at least if let's take a step back and say they're not necessarily lies. But gosh, I got so sick of politics when I started hearing about core truths and things that had to be written down before they were really promises and things that didn't have to be. We've been let down by our politicians in the past, and that's why there's no Liberal person standing here, because the political engagement has dropped dramatically. I'd like to see it improved by having quality candidates who can get the job done, who've got lots of good ideas and actually want to get them up and running in Parliament.
Well, I'm not going to argue with a man that wears short-sleeve shirts on a night like this. And I'm not going to take the opportunity to give the Liberal Party a kick. I just will say 2 things. Poor old John, he thinks politicians are so bad he wants to be one. 2, take back the public funding. You know who will be advantaged? The big political parties. We can fundraise. We have other opportunities to gain support. Take away public funding and you'll deny people like John. That's who you'll deny. Because they don't have the capacity to raise money. We want a democracy in which everyone can be a participant. We don't want a US-style democracy where you can only run if you're wealthy. And public funding, and it's a small amount in terms of our national budget, gives all people the opportunity to run for Parliament. Just one last point on the new electorate. Many of you might remember the name Bert James. Bert James was the member of Hunter for 20 years. Doc Everett in between, and for 32 years before that, Rowley James was the member here. Hunter didn't push up into the rural parts of the valley until 1984. And for the last 20 years, or 32 years, that has been the case. Hunter's actually gone back to its original form. The western side of Lake Macquarie, Morisset, these areas were always part of Hunter, and I think in many ways we should celebrate that because there's so much community of interest between the western side of the lake and the what we used to call the coalfield. So, not such a bad thing.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you. I have 3 very quick questions. The first is to the independents and the Richard Stretton. What and where is your preferences going to? You can answer me when I sit down. Secondly, what are you or intend to do about this multiple voting? And don't say it doesn't happen, it does happen. I was listening to the radio today where they went to a vacant block and there were 9 people living there, and on the house there was 15 there. What is being done? We've got a Medicare card which could solve the problems. Number 3, to Mr Fitzgibbon, you talked about stopping the funding. Would the Labor Party refuse money from the unions? Those are my 3 questions.
Back to the first question. What was the first? Preferences. That's right. Preferences. Yeah, preferences don't officially exist anymore. Alright? That's one thing we need to make clear. Preferences don't exist. Since the Senate rules have changed, no party can assign your preferences for you. It's a good thing. They probably did it for the wrong reasons. Both major parties knew it would make it hard for small parties to get up. But the fact is they did the right thing, even if it was for the wrong reasons. So no one can assign your preferences for you. You have to vote 6 above, this is in the Senate, 6 above the line, or you can go more. Wherever your number stops is where your vote stops. Right? Your first preference, even your first preference cannot assign your preference or your vote to anyone else. Good thing, and that's how it is. What we can do, the only influence we have over you, the voters now, is that how to vote card. And that's all it is, a recommendation. It's just a piece of paper to say this is how we recommend you vote. There's no obligation to follow that, and the party cannot push your vote any further than that. So, yes, with our preferences, we have preference national second across the nation. We now have, we've traditionally been a state party, been in state politics for 35 years with Fred Nile and Paul Green, or Fred for 35 years. This year, we are pushing federal. For the same reasons that there are record numbers of people walking out of both major parties, the same reason we're having trouble working with those same major parties. There's some moral issues that are just going through that we simply can't work with either party on some of those issues. So, we've done a deal with the Nationals, and that's a party deal. I personally would rather see you leave both major parties out of the paper altogether. In the Senate vote, obviously you can't in the House of Reps, you've got to number them all. But I feel we've really got to break down the power of the two major parties. My 50 years of life, and I've had no option other than seeing a Liberal all over government all my life. Well, I'm actually not too sure about the first years, I wasn't following politics or voting. But yeah, and yet in that 50 years I see an ongoing, consistent assault on both manufacturing and agriculture in this country. The two backbone fundamental issues that hold this country up. And both major parties, doesn't matter which one it is, are destroying them both under the guise of what they call open market free trade, which was talked about before. It is not our friend. Right? We can't compete on a level playing field and shouldn't want to compete on a level playing field with China, or else you'll be getting $2 an hour just like they do just to compete. Right, so that's on the preferences. There was three parts to that.
The other was that the stop the multiple voting.
Sorry? Oh, yeah.
Stopping multiple. I mean, I can come along.
It's an issue, it's complicated, and we do need some sort of inquiry into that. We need to get all the information, that's going to be the hard bit. But there is corruption out there, we all know that. How we can deal with that, I think the best way to deal with that would be an inquiry into the issue.
Go to the light cap, I'll say.
South Africa has you marked off on the computer, has for 20 years.
So
just vote in South Africa.
Just want to pick up on that. Just want to pick up on that question about independence preferences. At 20 past, so I know we're going to run out of time, but let's hear a little bit about that.
Being an independent means you're independent, and so I'm leaving that your preference up to you. I'm saying put me one, and then how you want to vote after that, that's fine. But it's interesting that the Labor Party, the Greens, the Liberals and the Christian Democrats have done national deals. So if it is their ballot paper and they don't agree with that ballot paper, why don't they insist as a candidate that they should be able to put who they think should go on that ticket? So if you are saying that these people are representing a party and they're not beholden to their party, well they are. So number one rule is the party comes first, you're the political party, and you come second. With an independent, you come first, and whoever else, forget them.
Sorry, I really need to respond to the point that John just raised then about national deals. The group that's running the campaign for the Hunter electorate for the Greens is comprised of representatives of three local groups, Lake Macquarie, Cessnock Curry and Upper Hunter. And we made a local decision, as Greens groups do right across the country. There is no national decision. We looked at the policies of all the parties and we examined what we could of John's policies that he had released at the time. We made a considered decision on who we could support. We gave our number 2 to Labor because after ours they had the next best policy on climate change and they had a good policy on education. And those are what we accepted as the main considerations. And that was a local decision, and it's a local decision by groups right across the country. And on preferences, I would say it's always been up to the voter to give preferences. It's something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. So anything you're given on how to vote is a suggestion. The only exception to that was above the line Senate voting, and that has changed. So now every voter can decide where they put the numbers. You just follow the rules and do it. Thank you.
allocating preferences. Might have a vote card that just says vote 1 for me, and then allocate numbers 2 to 8 in your order of preference. There's a good reason for that, apart from the fact that I want to take a middle road. I think it's really important that we, in this region, are not tied to party politics. I agree with John. The only way we're going to get change in this region is to get rid of the old way of doing things and do things differently. You know, this region really needs better representation than just somebody who has an allegiance to a party. And I think that's the most important emphasis that we can put on this, I can put on this debate tonight, is that we really should be ensuring that whoever our next candidate is, that their first and primary allegiance is here, not to a party. On your question about multiple voting, AEC, the Australian Electoral Commission, simply needs to enforce this more. So I don't know whether we need more funding allocated to that, but I was under the impression the AEC did a pretty good job of checking on these things. But if that's not the case, I'd be very interested to know, and here's some of the examples that you've got of that. Thanks.
I'll just be quick because I see the time's 25 past already. I tell people to research all the candidates that they can. If you don't have the internet, use the newspaper. If you don't have newspapers or internet, try and see a poster and call someone or whatever. Find out about their candidates themselves and their policies and see how closely they match your own ideals, and make your own preferences that way. I've got quite a lot on my website, which I appreciate a lot of people, only about, I'll say there might be a third of people in Western Lake Macquarie don't even have the internet at their household. It's about 66% that does. But I've had on my website for a number of years, probably since 2013 or whenever I made it, the need for electoral reform. That includes, showing ID to vote. You have to have ID to drive a car, to go to the bank, to do whatever else. Yet you don't need ID to go to the bank. We should have electronic rolls at the polling places so that you can't have little Johnny goes to 70 different polling places, votes 70 times. Then he might well get a fine at the end. He might not, because he just denies that he voted 70 times. But that's 69 extra votes that count towards someone, but you can't tell who they count towards. There have been elections in the area that have had candidates lose by 19 votes, etc.
I think I need to answer the third question was specifically to me, Rob, about unions, but I just need to quickly say a couple of things. Who will join me in a call to abolish out-of-vote cards? You like out-of-vote cards? You like all those people bombarding you as you approach the... Oh, good. I'll organise more people on the booths down here. You will be well and truly bombarded. We'll cut down a few more trees and we will bombard you. A couple of points. We do still have preferential voting in both the Senate and House of Reps. It's alive and well, and I think that's a good thing. We made some changes in the Senate, or the Parliament did, about how those preferences are distributed. Multiple voting, obviously a concern on face value, but there have been a number of parliamentary and AEC inquiries that have concluded that while there's a problem, they've seen no evidence that's a big enough problem to make a difference. Now, you might say some seats are won by a small margin, but there's been no evidence that it makes a difference. The fact is, we will fix this when we get a decent national broadband network. So people can do things electronically and things can be checked in a split second. That's the answer. On union funding, yes, the Labor Party will continue to accept donations from the union. We're no more likely to give that up than Malcolm Turnbull and Barnaby Joyce are to give up donations from Gina Reinhardt and Twiggy Forrest, the major banks, the mining companies, the list goes on and on and on. Now, not every trade union leader always gets it wrong, nor does every business person. But we're proud of our connection with the union movement. My 3 kids did casual work when they were at school and at university. They said, Dad, will I join the union? I said, yes, because you have trouble with your employer one day, you might need that help. Guess what? 2 out of 3 turn to the union for help because they're being exploited by their employer. So we're proud of that link. We work together with the unions to make sure that basic rights in this country are upheld. We have a common view about workers' rights, and we will continue to work to hold that common view and to work together.
As as a member, which I was for many years at BWIU, I was never asked, was it right for my funds to be given to the Labor, whether I voted for them or not?
Well, I don't think Twiggy Forrest's shareholders are asked before he hands over money to Malcolm Turnbull either.
Okay, what I'd like to do is take your question and take the question from the lady down here, take the question and see if we can get some response, but that might just be putting your question out there for conversation with the candidates when we close, okay? Because it's 28 past 7. So please, let's hear the question.
I just want to say, I've got a few images here from the Great Barrier Reef. 93% of the Great Barrier Reef has been bleached in this year, and 35% of the Great Barrier Reef is dead. And I've got a few images of the Great Barrier Reef here, of dead images of the Great Barrier Reef here. Here, I've got 100% renewable energy here that can literally save the Great Barrier Reef right now. I have never been to the Great Barrier Reef, and my generation before me has never been to the Great Barrier Reef, and I just want to know which parties are going to do something about bringing in 100% renewable energy, especially for the hunter, because we produce a lot of the CO2 here, which creates this. So I want to know, what are you going to do about renewable energy in this country and in your country? Thank you.
Could we just hear your question so we know whether we've got time to get a response? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm wondering how each of you will work with Lake Macquarie City Council and the state government in protecting and conserving and managing the bushland of West Lake Macquarie. And thank you, RJ and Joel, for joining my little Facebook group on the Awapa State Conservation Area. Proposed.
So they are both questions from an environmental area. So I'm just going to see if we can get a quick response from, yes, thanks.
I will keep this quick. I'll state as a fact that the Greens have the best policy on climate change and changing to renewable energy, ahead of either of the old parties, Labor and Liberals. We have an achievable plan for 90% renewable energy by 2030. Yeah, we know that can work, and there will certainly be opportunities to improve that along the way. Other countries have gone for days at a time using only renewable energy, and this is in Europe where they've got less sunlight than we have. So, yeah, we're not going to stand up and say now that we're going to achieve 100% by a certain time, but yes, that will come in the future. We clearly have the best policy now. For the other question on conservation of bushland, I think I stated my credentials earlier in the night in that I have worked very hard on something that I feel passionate about, which has seen the conservation of bushland on the foreshore of Lake Macquarie in the Lake Macquarie State Conservation Area. Before I got involved in that, I was involved in a campaign on the other side of the lake that conserved Green Point. I have been involved in successful campaigns of protected areas from open cut mining, and those areas still are known as bushland. I've been involved in a successful campaign to protect parts of the Wadigans from logging, so that now there's a mixture of state forests and national parks there. I was involved in the campaign for the national parks, and I think people across the country look to the Greens for leadership on all of these issues, and I'm confident that the Greens are providing all the leadership here and now. Thank you.
Folks, can I thank you for your engagement tonight? Can I apologise to those that are still busting to ask a question but won't get that opportunity to have that responded to up front? I want to keep faith with the timing for tonight. We've had some energy there. You can sense the passion around some of those issues, and that, for me, was really part of the goal for tonight. And I'm grateful to many of you for coming and bringing those questions. I'm pretty sure that our candidates would at least be happy to hang around for a little while and engage in conversation, but I made sure that the commitment was to 7:30. So I'm going to understand if that doesn't happen, but I'm pretty sure that at this stage of the campaign they're happy to converse with you before you leave, so you don't have to rush off. So thank you for coming, and would you join me in thanking each of the candidates for their willingness to engage with us and what they're committed. We wish you all well in your pursuit of the best sausage sizzle in the Hunter electorate on Saturday, but in seriousness, we wish you well in further engagement with your various perspectives and messages. I really do hope that a night like tonight represents people's willingness to engage in the issues and their passion for the future. I was in a conversation with a number of people earlier today about people not really valuing their vote, and that notion of the annoyance of having to go out on Saturday, and I'll be as annoyed as anybody else. But I have a friend who grew up in Chile who often reminds me that in that country, before the military took over, it was not unlike Australia. And the idea that those are rights that we could lose easily was something that she knew only too well. So look, I encourage us to value that opportunity. I say thanks again for coming, and I look forward to engaging in these kinds of things and in processes like tonight, and inviting you as a community to come into this space again at some future time and engage in these kinds of ways together. So thanks everyone.